This is Jacob deGrom. Ever heard of him?
I think he's the best pitcher in the game.
Jacob deGrom, I think, is going to win.
Jacob deGrom.
I think he snuck another Cy Young away from all the other contenders.
The best pitcher in baseball. Jacob deGrom, MVP.
Surely you've heard of him. But before he ever rose to the dominance we all know about today, let me take you back to May 15, 2014. Jacob deGrom is making his big league debut in front of just over 40,000 fans at Citi Field. These fans aren't piling into an MLB stadium in Queens to see him. No, they're here to see Derek Jeter, the longtime New York Yankees captain who is about to play his final game at the home ballpark of his crosstown rivals, the New York Mets. Including this game, during his career, Jeter had played 43 regular season games against the Mets in their home stadium. He's been solid against his New York counterparts, and maintained a .297 average in those contests. That's merely a grain of sand in the ocean of achievements that stem from his Hall of Fame career. However, from one New York legend's career ending to another one just starting, this game will be less about Derek Jeter and more so about Jacob deGrom. deGrom comes into this game after becoming a pitcher just 5 years earlier. His journey to get here, to this moment, almost shouldn't have happened. If not for a little bit of well-timed humor and a scout who refused to call it a night, we might not have ever gotten the chance to see this moment right here. But yet, we do. The world doesn't know it yet, but this long-haired, slenderly built kid from Florida will become one of the greatest pitchers of his generation, but yet all the while, we'll hardly ever get to see him take the mound. His story is remarkable, impressive, but above all, tragic. This is the modern tragedy of Jacob deGrom. Long before he'll ever be known to the masses, Jacob deGrom was a star basketball player from DeLand, Florida. Additionally, he's a country boy at heart and is known locally for hosting some of the biggest bonfires in the history of humanity. Okay, maybe not, but his bonfires were so large that they often required construction equipment to replenish the ongoing flame. And if he wasn't on the hardwood or burning it up, deGrom could have been found scouting for small alligators merely just to fuck with in his free time. To his friends, he was a classic good old country boy, but to his coaches, he was a competitive and fiery spirit that wouldn't take anything less than success. In what was often considered his best sport, basketball, he was an All-State nominee and voted as conference's Player of the Year in 2007, when he averaged 16 points a game. His talent was often marveled as he was often better known as a basketball star rather than a baseball player. But even with the basketball talent so prominent that he likely would have been a collegiate star, deGrom's true passion lied within the confines of a baseball diamond. Now, there aren't any public statistics of deGrom's high school baseball experience, but what is known is that he was enough of a standout to earn him a roster spot at Stetson University, a college located in... you guessed it, DeLand, Florida. He's a homeboy, always will be, made evident when he elected to play Division I baseball for his hometown college team. He entered Stetson as a shortstop, often credited as being a defensive standout with a sweet swing. But it appeared that his swing was mostly aesthetic related, as many teammates would joke that he had a hole in his bat, regardless of having the fundamentals required to hit the ball. Their jokes weren't all that wrong either. Usually you'd expect a shortstop with a high-praise swing to produce some offensive numbers that stand out. deGrom's, on the other hand, did not. In his first 2 seasons at Stetson, deGrom had yet to hit any home runs, and would get on base less than a third of the time at the plate. He wasn't exactly scaring any opposing pitchers, but all the while, deGrom was completely content on developing as a shortstop. Luckily for everyone else involved, the universe had other plans. It's hard to pinpoint a date, but sometime around his sophomore season, in the midst of mediocre hitting, deGrom found himself hanging out with some of the pitchers in the team's bullpen. He remarked that he could throw faster than everyone in there. The reception was the opposite of agreement. It's not hard to blame the crowd for the reaction. I mean, these are trained pitchers, guys that have spent far more time in the mound than deGrom. They've gone through training, bullpens, hell, whole seasons, working on and perfecting their craft. And here comes some shortstop from nowhere, Florida, saying that he, of all people, can throw faster than every last soul in that bullpen. It's as asinine of a comment as you can make. So for Stetson's pitching coach, his response was a safe one. He personally guaranteed that if deGrom threw 90 miles per hour, he'd see it through that deGrom got on the pitcher's mound for a game. Guess what he does next? I fucking love this guy. Sure enough, he only needed a handful of pitches before he was lighting up a radar gun with a constant read at 94. I mean, come on. How often does it happen where a baseball team's best pitcher just so happens to be their shortstop? That's some Henry Rowan Gardner stuff right there. It simply just doesn't happen. unless you're Dave Stieb, who later became an all-star pitcher, who similarly picked up pitching just for the hell of it. I won't dive into that because John Boyce and Secret Base have covered his story exhaustively. Regardless, Stetson's pitching coach held his end of the bargain, and during deGrom's sophomore season, he made his pitching debut. And fittingly, he was dominant in the one inning he pitched. And as an encore to his sophomore college campaign, he briefly joined the DeLand Suns, the summer baseball team. His blink of an eye stint with the Suns ended after a handful of pitching appearances. The reason for the brief nature? deGrom only wanted to play shortstop. With a rocket for an arm and a potential change on the horizon, Stetson's plan for deGrom's junior year was to have him be the everyday shortstop and bring him in as the team's closer when needed. A happy medium, if you will. But sometimes the best laid plans don't always pan out, and after a 3-8 start, Stetson needed a change. They felt that deGrom, who had only made a handful of pitching appearances in the season, was their best chance at wins, especially on weekends. Upon learning of Stetson's new plan, deGrom offered, "Can I still play short?" You gotta give it to the man. He really loved playing shortstop, but shit, man, I don't know a single person who, upon finding out that they have $1 million, wouldn't go spend a dime of it. Whereas the $1 million is his impeccable pitching arm, and his lack of spending being his headstrong attitude to playing shortstop, deGrom wanted to lock it in his savings and just ignore the newfound fortune. If he was trying to build up a healthy savings plan, that's one thing, but this is baseball. You can't just leave the best attribute hidden in a position that doesn't immediately benefit the team, especially considering he's swinging a block of Swiss cheese as his baseball bat. But hesitance and reluctance only go so far, because usually the coach will get his way. As on March 13th, 2010, just a hair over 4 years to when he would make his MLB debut on a pitcher's mound, deGrom would make his first collegiate start for the Stetson Hatters. His performance helped secure his first win as a pitcher at any level of baseball. And little did he know, but during this early development as a pitcher, he had caught the eye of Les Parker in the New York Mets. In what was one of deGrom's first ever pitching appearances when he was closing games for the Hatters, Parker had been in attendance. In fact, deGrom was the listed starting shortstop. It wasn't until later in the game that deGrom would grace the mound, and by the time that he made his presence felt on the pitching rubber, most scouts had already called it a night. But universal forces compelled Parker to stay to the final pitch. His patience was definitely rewarded. He had seen that deGrom's mechanics had all of the makings to be a big league player, but there was still some more scouting to do to ensure the hunch was correct. A few games later, deGrom would match up against Chris Sale. Yeah, you heard me right. That Chris Sale. The same Chris Sale who deGrom hit his only collegiate home run off of. Result of their first matchup aside, this game came as a signal to their onlooking scouts that deGrom was for real. He had next level stuff, and the only person that needed further convincing of this was the man himself. He may not have embraced it yet, but this game would be a sobering reality to him, that his best skill set lies not with his bat, but rather on a pitcher's mound. Additionally, the reality of this matchup against Chris Sale was that the Mets weren't there to see the future first rounder, but rather confirm their belief that the right-hander from DeLand, Florida was for real. The Mets, following a stellar game from deGrom, knew they had their guy. They say in life you need a little bit of luck to have some of your biggest breaks. Now, for Jacob deGrom, he didn't need a little bit of luck. No. He needed all of the luck in the world to come his way. Because when it comes to scouting, Stetson University isn't exactly a hotspot. It occupies very little of the attention of high-level scouts. Essentially, they're the equivalent of getting pretzels on Halloween. You know that they're in your bucket, but there's far better options available like Kit Kats and Twix bars. But every now and then, you have a person who actually prefers those pretzels, and that's where they turn their focus to first. It was this hunch from Les Parker about a shortstop turned closing pitcher that led him and the Mets to select Jacob deGrom as a starting pitcher with the 272nd pick of the 2010 amateur draft. And it's a good thing that it all came together this way too, because for deGrom, there was quite literally no plan B in life if baseball didn't work out. So, if it weren't for a joke in a bullpen about throwing faster than his teammates, and were it not for Les Parker's determination to see all 27 outs in a little cared about college baseball game, we may not have ever seen the next chapter of Jacob deGrom's story. Following draft day, deGrom had gotten his feet wet in rookie ball with the Mets affiliate in Kingsport, Tennessee. The now full-time starting pitcher had made 6 pretty lackluster starts. But you can't blame the guy. I mean, here's a 22-year-old kid that just found out less than a year ago that his best strength is as a pitcher, and not a shortstop. If you count up every pitching appearance he's ever made to this point, including rookie ball and summer league, deGrom has only graced a mound 30 times in his life. For reference, a typical MLB starting pitcher makes about that many starts in a single season. deGrom essentially has 1 season's worth of experience to his name as a pitcher. To struggle after 6 starts in a professional league with that lack of experience, it's understandable. However, that same lack of experience and conditioning might have been a contributing factor to his subsequent injury. deGrom would end up being sidelined following a partial tear of his UCL in his throwing arm, and although he tried to rehab briefly, he ultimately had to undergo Tommy John surgery. This not only took away his 2010 season, but also kept him off the field for 2011 as well. deGrom returned to baseball action in 2012 and had his first full season in the starting pitcher role. He would from this point prove that he was meant to be a full-time pitcher as he recorded stellar numbers. As for 2013, deGrom would enter spring training with perhaps one of the most wild injuries you'll ever hear of. While attempting to castrate a calf, deGrom found himself on the receiving end of a kick that inadvertently broke a finger on his non-pitching hand. And if you don't know what castrating is, well, let's just say Google will be your friend on that one. Feeling down about the freak injury, deGrom asked former MLB star and then single-A pitching coach Frank Viola if he'd ever reach the majors. Viola made a bold prediction that deGrom would in fact reach the majors, and in a specific year, the following season in 2014. Now that's a bold prediction for a player entering the 2013 year at the High A affiliate of the Mets, but perhaps it wasn't all that bold as deGrom pitched through the injury and speed ran his way through the Mets minor league system, ending the year at the highest non-MLB level, AAA. Heading into 2014, deGrom was ranked the 14th prospect in the Mets organization. At this stage, he was within striking distance of his dream job, one that didn't have a backup plan. After starting 2014 with a pace that would render a major league call-up, deGrom sat on the doorstep of the big leagues. However, the Mets entered the season with a full starting rotation, one that was capable of holding their own. That is until Dylan G, a usually durable starter, went down with a strained back muscle. This opened the door for deGrom's call-up to the MLB. So, here we are, back again at May 15th, 2014, the day of Jacob deGrom's MLB debut. Remember how I said earlier that this game will be more about deGrom than Derek Jeter? Well, let's address that elephant in the room. deGrom will silence Jeter in all 3 at-bats that he faces him. There. That's all the more exciting that matchup got. Jeter will go on to finish his career in the season, and good for him. But this is deGrom's time to shine. He enters today with a reported fastball topping off at around 94 miles per hour, and with some development, he could get faster, and he will. deGrom later in his career will reach an average fastball speed at over 99. With that velocity, he'll become the peak Jacob deGrom we all know and have come to appreciate. But before he gets there, the game in front of us gives us a first inning where he flashes an average fastball at 94, and at points even hitting 95. He is as advertised, and being as advertised is one thing, but to do that speed throughout the duration of a full game is another. From that inning onward, his average fastball is going to come in at a hair under 93. Not many pitchers have an average first inning fastball that is only 1 mile an hour faster than their following 6 innings of work. That's veteran level stuff right there, and it's coming from a guy that again, reluctantly picked up pitching because he was told to only 5 years earlier. His first and last innings have hardly any variance, and that's the beauty of his debut. Jacob deGrom's performance was about as flawless as you could have ever wanted from a pitcher who grew up as a shortstop. Hell, his debut was about all you could have ever wanted from a person who grew up as a pitcher. And speaking of his days as a shortstop, well, maybe I was too hard on Jacob deGrom, the hitter. Going into this game, the Mets were in some historic territory. Their pitchers had gone hitless in their last 64 at-bats, and with his first career at-bat, Jacob deGrom comes in and gets a hit on the first pitch.
And he lines one to center field, and the Mets finally have a hit by their pitchers. Jacob deGrom snaps the 0 for 64 streak.
Well, damn. Guess I'll take back the Swiss cheese bat comment. Ultimately, his debut ends in a loss, through hardly any fault of his own. deGrom pitched 7 innings and allowed just 1 run. However, the Mets couldn't muster any. This will be a common occurrence throughout his entire Mets tenure, and is ironic foreshadowing as he will later win a Cy Young Award off of just a 10-9 record in 2018. But, for all it's worth, this debut will kickstart a career that is among the most dominant in baseball history. Let's speed run the highlights. Did you catch all of that? He's one of the greatest pitching spans in baseball history. But moving on, Jacob deGrom is the kind of player that never wants to take no for an answer. I mean, isn't that apparent in his endless pursuit of trying to become a shortstop? So for an MLB career loaded with times he was able to take matters into his own hands and say yes, deGrom's body would deal him the ultimate betrayal. This chart here shows every year from 2010 to 2020, along with the number of starts that deGrom missed with each subsequent injury. This ultimately shows that he rarely missed the occasional appearance, aside from his only real setback coming from his UCL tear. None had cost him any major playing time. With the occasional misstart for varying reasons, there was no real indication for people to believe that deGrom would soon become a rare sight on the pitcher's mound. But, nonetheless, a rare sight he'll become. And in order to fully feel the magnitude, let's rejoin our hero's story in 2021, specifically June 16th. Entering the game today, deGrom is maintaining a staggering ERA of 0.56. It's so staggering that it qualifies to be considered historic. His first 10 starts to this year have been pretty elite company. With this start to his campaign in 2021, deGrom is one of just 8 starting pitchers since 1920 to allow less than 4 earned runs over 64 or more innings of work. The list includes a bunch of guys that would later win the Cy Young in that respective year, including Bob Gibson, who was so unfathomably good that the MLB had to change the physical traits to a pitcher's mound to make a more even competitive balance. But deGrom, however, is the only one of these pitchers to do this to start a season. He's in God mode right out of the gates. But every god pays a heavy price along the way to success, and in deGrom's case, his price tag will be injuries. He exited his previous start just 5 days earlier for inflamed muscles, and today, well, he'll exit after 3 perfect innings, of which included 8 strikeouts. He's pissed. He doesn't want to be told no. He doesn't want interruptions. He is a man whose life's mission is to be the greatest there ever was, but ultimately, there was no backup plan. This game is his passion, but sometimes even the mightiest fall. And after attempting to push through injury in his next 4 starts, deGrom would undergo a series of MRIs to see just how damaged his throwing elbow actually was. At first, the results were hopeful. So much in fact that it was believed that the ligament in question was shown to be intact. But what these MRIs also revealed was that although the ligament was intact, it still had a partial tear. But where there's a will, there's a way, especially in the world of Jacob deGrom. He ramped up training with the goal of helping the Mets in the 2021 playoffs, but that was merely just an optimist outlook. The Mets missed the playoffs, ultimately leaving deGrom's legendary campaign in the rearview mirror. He's pissed again. He feels like he personally let the team down. He's taking the fall for the Mets' absence from the playoffs, and that's who he is. He's a gamer. He doesn't want to miss a single pitch, but he will, over and over again. He'll encounter a huge setback in spring training of 22, keeping him off the field until August of that same year, marking over a full year since he last took a mound in a regular season game. Are you sensing a theme here? Things will continue like this for deGrom over and over and over again. He's had many surgeries, and as many rushed attempts to get back on a mound, even if just for a few times in a season. His greatest strength is that he is so devastatingly talented, but perhaps even more so is that his greatest weakness is that his body is shutting down in front of his and our eyes. It's 2025 at the time of writing out this script, and if it feels like the timeline is sped up a little too fast for your liking just now, that's because Jacob deGrom has only pitched 132 innings since his 2021 injury, effectively 33 innings a season. Sure, he's been serviceable during this time, but for a pitcher who was once the greatest of his generation and on his way to becoming one of the greatest of all time, the curse of injuries have stolen any remaining greatness he had left. He could pitch for many more years, but will it be as good? Probably not. And knowing that the best deGrom had to offer was riddled with injuries is tragic. His story deserved better. His rise was so unlikely and so unprecedented that he was already in the middle of his 20s by the time he debuted. And although he aged like fine wine with his successes at the back part of the 2010s while he was in his early 30s, this decade has quickly soured the wine and ruined the award-winning taste that should have otherwise been untarnished. It's criminal, it's devastating, and above all, tragic. Baseball is not fair, baseball does not care, and no matter how hard he tried, his body gave up before he did. He certainly won't give up though. He's never won more than 15 games in a season. He's never pitched for a win in a World Series. He's never had a full year without questions, but in his prime, He was the best pitcher alive. He threw like the rules didn't apply to him. It's almost as if they didn't. I mean, what shortstop wins back-to-back Cy Young awards? But the fact of the matter is, no matter how desperate his pursuit of greatness was, his body was the ultimate tormentor. Jacob deGrom didn't fall off. He was taken from us. Slowly, cruelly, and quietly. And although his career isn't over yet, we didn't get enough. Nobody did. And in a sick and poetic sort of way, well, that's baseball for you.